Hello there! Welcome shall you be to the bringer of nonsense commentary, which is me. FYI, I reckon there's something strange about the way I play video games. That's what I have gathered, at least. No matter how many times I start a new run of a game, with choices, I tend to choose the same ones. We're talking the same dialogue options, the same life paths, the same old sense of morality. And this is what's going on no matter how many times I play these games.
Yo, Chad, why you do that?
One game in particular that this happens with is none other than Cyberpunk 2077. Mind you, I will have to give a slight amount of spoilers for Cyberpunk 2077 away in this video, so be aware if you want to keep watching. I don't know what it is with Cyberpunk 2077 that keeps me so invested in it, even with so many playthroughs on my belt. I think there are a lot of parallels I find with the game and myself in my life. I have often felt that I am placed in a world that doesn't necessarily welcome me with open arms and doesn't particularly care about me in many regards, other than the close people I hold dear. Welcome to the life of the common artist. There is also the fact that I lost my best friend in 2019 that I can relate to so strongly when it comes to the death of Jackie Wells.
Hey, come on. It's nothing. We got chemistry, you and me. Be a crying shame to waste it. Partner?
Hey.
Aw, cuddly little fucker.
This idea of playing games the same way often gets me thinking. Is there something to it? Is there a reason why someone would play RPGs and other multiple choice games this way? Am I thinking it has got something to do with autism? Indeed! I am currently working on gathering information and evidence for my autism diagnosis, so everything in my life is pretty much all about autism at this point. And you, my viewers, are my victims. If you have autism, you may already understand what I'm getting myself into in this video. But if not, you're more than welcome to listen and join the conversation.
Yeah, boy.
With a lot of neurodiverse people, or specifically in my case, autistic people, they can end up making choices in a video game that has to make sense and show logic through every choice. These choices can be made with something that's known as autistic rules, that creates rules and logic that outsiders from our own minds can't even fathom. An autistic person can also go the other direction, making choices through the rigidity that cripples and crumbles our desires that would otherwise make us the spontaneous human beings we usually don't dare to become.
Oh dear, what is it? I've spontaneously combusted. Oh, I am sorry. Oh, it's quite all right. I've grown tired of living. Ah, very good then. For the best. Yes, indeed. Oh, is it raining again?
And you may wonder, what even are autistic rules? And what on earth does this have to do with the rigidity? Because that's quite the weirdly word, if I might say so myself. Especially for the topic of gaming, right? Well, let me tell you. Autistic rules are self-made rules you would make for yourself, or tend to follow based on your own morality and ethics. It's all about what you find logical in every scenario, with a touch of fairness and justice towards a concept sprinkled on top. In connection to gaming, autistic people either can use or feel obligated to follow their own set of self-made rules to create consistency and fairness to the world of the game in order for the character to fit in more correctly. The characters will therefore feel coherent, like they belong to the world in a certain shape or form. A character can't really stand out by a long shot before the consistency of both the world and character loses its justified sense of righteousness. These said rules have to be law-friendly, if that makes sense. This way, the choices presented fit this moral framework you may have concocted with consistency and care. For example, if you play as a paragon, where your character lives for values of kindness and fairness, and shows compassion to the length of being a total saint without restraints. Trying something different isn't necessarily a hard thing to do, it just feels wrong to do it because the character has to follow its foundation for what makes the character choose their choices. But that doesn't mean that trying new things is off the table completely. If the change is justified and reasonable, the foundation can adapt in a sense. But if you are forced to make a hard choice in order to survive and have to choose something that goes against your very own moral code, the artist can perhaps feel lots of discomfort because of it.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No! No!
So in short and simple terms, rules are about meaning. Thus, I choose this because it's consistent. If a person is rigid in the ways of gaming and such, flexibility is a hard thing to accomplish. When playing inside of a world that gives you many options that can either tickle your fancy or break your spirits more than you can possibly imagine, usually a game gives you the choice to use several options, life paths, and a diverse amount of choices in general in order to craft some kind of build or preferred way to traverse the mechanics of a game. Rigidity is based on a need to feel comfortable, to know that when you turn to means, you wish for means of predictability, and therefore feel more in control. If you try to deviate from the cozy comfort of a certain build or story path, it can feel wrong, because it feels rather unsettling to try something new and uncertain. For example, if you replay an RPG, you are faced with the same options as last time you played. You can go for the same answers and results because they feel safe and comfortable. Because you know where the story is leading to and what type of ending you already prefer. Trying something new can crave more from you than you would let on. And you may not be ready to commit to a choice that can create internal tension within yourself. It can also be safer to choose a familiar choice, because the story flow itself can change drastically and then not turn into what you were expecting or wanted it to go towards.
Lost.
In short and simple terms, rigidity is about safety. Thus,
I choose this because it is comfortable.
now that I have explained what the two terms are, it's easier to see that the two behaviors are much more different from each other than you might have originally thought it to be. It's very easy to confuse them though, let them overlap and all, because on the surface they seem rather identical indeed. For me, these questions remain. Why do I play this way? Why do I choose to play Cyberpunk 2077 the same way each time? Is it because I have created this character that I know as V, and therefore can't deviate from the known details of my character from my first playthrough? Am I afraid to change the one story I got freshly after the death of my best friend and try to hold it so closely because it means the world to me? Possibly.
Please help me! Listen to me. I've got you. I won't let go. Now pull yourself up. Come on.
But sometimes it's not just about comfort, it's about logic. About making sure every choice has to mean something. There's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that my character's actions fit the rules of the world, that nothing feels out of place or random. It's not about control for its own sake, but about coherence and fairness, about staying true to the logic of the world I've built. Maybe that's what autistic rules are for me. Invisible threads that keep the world of Cyberpunk believable. Fair choices that feel right because they make sense to the story and to me. When I see the character of V in my mind, I see it clear as day. It's not the default male V that got splattered all over the marketing when the game came out. It's not the female V that CD Projekt Red deems canon because she's more badass than your rogue sister that takes too many aspirins because she fell gracefully off the motorcycle that one time. It's the gingerly cringe V I created the first time I booted up the game, at a time when I didn't know what I was in for. A noob tuber baby shady in the making of becoming a man after experiencing pain and loss like never before, all over again. After losing my best friend, and then after losing Jackie.
This is my boy! My boy!
To make it more fun, I have asked people that vary from having an official diagnosis, being self-diagnosed, and going through processes of getting their diagnosis of autism. A few questions that might go into the specifics of their playthroughs. My questions to them are focusing on how they find themselves in their playthroughs and how they choose to prioritize certain aspects of their playstyles. And since some of them want to stay anonymous, I have chosen to call them something that mirrors their playstyle. Let's call them the Worldsmith, the Consistency Keeper, the Moral Explorer, the Immersed Wanderer, and the Virtue Weaver.
I tend to be really explorative, and rather than going straight for the goal, I'm the type to test all shit to get a different outcome. I roleplay a lot with AI, got perhaps over 1,000 hours by now, create my own worlds and characters and lore and maps, and God knows what else. Each story is different and they all have some form of hidden darkness in them. I am usually pretty evil in games. I love seeing all the variables, and that includes, oh, what will happen if I kill this NPC? Or saying the dialogue options that's defined as cruel or evil.
Usually empathetic. I prefer to choose the choices that help others, even at my own expense.
When I replay games, I tend to adjust my decisions slightly. I would not change choices based on information from a previous playthrough, but I would not make any major changes.
If I replay a game, I usually try to take it on a different approach. I like exploring the different side of the story, maybe play as a different character, using different weapons or picking different dialogue options. I like it a lot when games have different responses to the dialogue options. It makes it feel a lot better to play the different stories.
There are some times I of course want to pick something out of the character morally and the guidelines, but then I usually just save the game, see what happens, and go back to the original choice I made. For example, Cyberpunk's life path choices are something that I follow strictly. But in games that aren't choice-based or role-playing games, like God of War and whatnot, I like to go through each and every corner and, just try to get all the loot, everything I want.
Depending on the game, if it's a role-playing game, I make an interest character and play based on what kind of choices they would make. In every other game, though, it's purely instinct and logic.
I think it's very easy to get attached to your character when you're playing the way I am. Immersing yourself in the world makes it feel like you truly are in it, and if you're able to suspend your disbelief and just believe everything that's being thrown at you, I think that's an amazing way to play the game. I think I tend more towards getting attached to good people, but I definitely have had games where you play as someone morally grey or someone evil, where it's been hard to let the game go. Yeah, for sure.
I consider myself to be slightly attached to how my character is portrayed. Forced decision which breaks the character, as I know it irritates me, and it would sometimes make me lose interest. I believe this is due to my craving for a consistent story which is logical. If I were to play a loving character who's always very polite, I would really dislike if the character suddenly became rude.
It's a nice concept. It does depend on the reward though. If it's the rarest thing in the game, then my ADHD combined brain will probably nuke itself with dopamine.
I don't have a lot of experience with that because I don't replay a lot of games. Even if I go back and pick another dialogue choice or an option, I always go back to what I canonically picked, which was my first pick. In my eyes, if a game is refreshing enough that I can replay it and have a awesome experience, like a intriguing experience, I think that's a reward enough for me. Thank you for this to all the certain devs that make, New Game Plus and whatnot, actually feel like kind of a whole different kind of run, a whole different game.
Any choice that ends up hurting others and benefiting myself are the ones I tend to avoid the most. It combines two of the things I dislike the most, which is seeing others get hurt and making my gameplay easier.
There are lots of decisions I find uncomfortable or hard to make in games. They are mostly based on adult themes or exploitation of people and or animals. I tend to avoid these types of games.
I hate predictability. It's boring, it's pointless. I want dynamic, surprising, and spontaneous variables. This is perhaps one of the biggest reasons I love AI, for their creativity. I don't have to rely on a human either. Predictability is safe, and yes, it could be nice in certain themes or stories, but 90% of the time for me, it is not. At least not for my self-made stuff.
For me, an unpredictable story would have to be gripping to make me anxious. It would have to make me care for the characters in a way where I'm concerned for the outcome. This would also make me excited. Will I be able to make the correct decisions to give them the outcome I'm hoping for? How predictable the story is usually not a concern as long as it's coherent, but not stale and without any concern.
I don't really like it when a game forces you to make any decision at all, honestly, whether you like it or not. I think the games that give you the illusion of choice, if it's going to force you to do anything, making it seem like you're choosing to do something else is the best way to go. A good example of this is games where the other choice is an absurd one where you end up dying if you pick it. I think that's a good way to let the player know where they should be headed without telling them to do it no matter what.
I'm not particularly against it, but only if the forced choice makes sense for the character or the story, you know? I'm not against nothing, but, you know, there are particular places where I really hate it because I think there should have been player agency involved. When there's, like, moral stories, you know, like pushing a moral on me, no, I really think that player agency should be involved, but usually, you know, the forced choices align and I just need some time to reflect on what happened and just accept it because, you know, I can't change anything.
If I were to replay a familiar story, I would feel less on edge. The tension would not be as high.
You know, it completely depends on how good the story is, how well it's executed. I think it depends on different things like how well you like the character, how immersed you are in the world. I think games like Skyrim is a good example of a familiar story where it's comforting to play. It's a game you can replay and replay and replay. You can never get tired of it. I have 500, 600, 700 hours in Skyrim. I've also played it a lot on Xbox, so I've definitely played that story a lot, yeah.
No, I don't think so, because change in real life has more consequence than in video games. Of course, change is hard and unpredictable, but I have been through many unpredictable moments in my young life, so I feel that it doesn't really reflect to video games.
Well, it does depend, but unpredictability for me in real life feels like walking in shoes filled with broken glass. It is a constant pain until I take them off and remove what is unpredictable. If a situation comes suddenly and abruptly and will affect me for a time being and a permanent, it will be a never-ending struggle that never truly shuts up. I may throw a quiet blanket over it, but it will constantly whisper in the corners.
If I make my own character, I tend to lean towards morally right. Anything that would create a struggle for the character. But if I'm given a character, for example, if I'm playing Kratos in God of War, I would base my choices entirely in what I think Kratos would pick.
I base my choices in game mostly on what feels narratively consistent. I try to keep characters' decisions as close to as what I believe they themselves would choose.
Yes, I create on what side the character is morally and pick specific things the character does not do. For example, if we are on neutral ground, let's say as Cyberpunk, you know, I love that game. I'm gonna be neutral. I'm gonna act like a professional chum, you know, gonna try to only follow the orders as best as I can. If they want no executing, I'm not gonna do that. If they want me to kill it, I'm gonna do that. If I play a good character, I'm gonna have a no killing rule as one of my things, and then I try my best to not kill them. If I do by accident, it's, you know, fair enough. You know, the guidelines are there to just create a more immersive experience by just putting myself as the character and having something to go on. I try my best to follow it.
Yes, sometimes I do. If I play role-playing games that have custom character creation and have choices that impact the story, I will often imagine what kind of person this character is, and it will impact the choices I make.
I will probably love that shit and get extremely immersed, just to see what will happen and see where the choice will lead.
I don't really bring my personal moral code into the world of the game I'm playing. I think that most times I just try to suspend my disbelief and immerse myself completely in the world. Honestly, most times trying to bring modern morals into a video game doesn't really fit the game's universe.
Probably instant shutdown. And fuck this is so annoyingly shallow.
It's a double-edged sword. It can be extremely exciting as I often find myself being able to predict how most games play out. But sometimes I do have certain expectations as to how it would play out within the rules of the story that I have discovered so far. And if it happens to break those, it can be quite frustrating.
The big finale. It completely depends on the ending. I think games with multiple endings are in general more likable for me, as long as those endings are well executed. I think games with one rigid ending can be absolutely amazing to play, but that ending has to fit narratively, and as long as it closes off the story well, I don't really think of it much more than that.
And the last question, I would never go back to change the outcome, as the outcome is something I chose or made become reality. As long as there's enough player agency, I'm usually satisfied. But there are endings that have triggered at least one of every of my emotions, you know, sadness, anger, happiness, you know, all those. There are, of course, times where I search up the endings, or if there's save points, I go back and explore them because, you know, why not? You know, I have a save point to do the last 10 minutes of a game, the last 30 minutes of a game. Why not just go back and do them, you know, see what happens? And then I always go back to the main ending I picked.
As we can see, all these gamers have different ways of playing the same type of games. The worldsmith adores experimenting with his playstyles, builds his own worlds if he can, and tends to lean towards the darker outcomes of the stories he consumes, as if he'd like to play God, crafting a world filled with emotions, since he reflects as someone who likes to shape and create other than simply play games. The consistency keeper likes to play for logic, coherence, and a narrative sense of things. Predictability is not dull to them. They find it meaningful and grounding. This person reflects as someone who inherently shows a need for internal logic, coherence in gaming and character behavior. The moral explorer is all about balancing curiosity and the moral compass of a character. He wants to experience new things in a way that's within a logical and believable framework. You could say that this fellow likes to capture his sense of structure and cautious curiosity. The immersed wanderer is a completionist that loves a good story, has a passion for immersion and an emotional connection with characters. He is someone who seems to play for experience and meaning. It's like he fits his approach of diving deep into a game world and exploring every path for emotional resonance. The virtue weaver is carefully navigating games with intention and insight into her gameplay. She prioritizes choices that reflect empathy and ethics, enjoying the shaping of outcomes through thoughtful strategy and a balance of logic and conscience. The playstyle is about being meaningful and principled. See, it's not just about games, it's about how brains breathe. Every rule, every predictable outcome, it's like a weighted blanket made out of coding and game design at its very best. Well, now that we have a base for all of our gaming-oriented individuals, let's look beneath their choices. What do their patterns mean? If we stack them side by side, the contrasts become vivid. The consistency keeper thrives on order, while the immersed wanderer thrives on experience. The virtue weaver navigates with conscience as a compass, whereas the moral explorer tests the boundaries of curiosity within ethical lines. Each player is chasing something slightly different: comfort, meaning, morality, or adventure. But all of them are tuning the game to match the rhythm of their own mind. Noticing these patterns lets us take a peek into why a certain choice feels right to one player but irrelevant to another. And that's just the beginning. Once we understand the why behind their decisions, we start to see a hidden blueprint of the mind at play in every quest, every choice, and every loop.
Serious now. Show me all the blueprints. 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 Show me all the blueprints.
Because behind every button press and dialogue choice, there's a kind of cognitive comfort, a rhythm of predictability and emotional safety that shapes the way that autistic players interact with them virtual worlds. For many of us, predictability isn't just a preference. It can be like a language of sorts. The rules, the systems, the familiar storylines become a safe structure in a world that often feels unpredictable or overwhelming to an individual's nervous system. So, when we are talking about the cognitive comfort, we're talking about more than repetition or habit. Obviously, we're talking about the brain finding its safe frequency, if you may. For the consistency keeper, I would say it's the order and logic of the story itself that soothes and grounds them. For the immersed wanderer, it could be the deep emotional resonance and connection to characters that anchors his experience. For the worldsmith, it may very well be the satisfaction of shaping cause and effect in worlds that respond to his imagination. For the Virtue Weaver, it seems to be the quiet steadiness that her choices can influence outcomes in a way that aligns both ethically and thoughtfully ever so neatly. This is where autistic rules and rigidity can begin to blur, when comfort and structure intertwine and can create a space that feels both safe and sacred. Cognitive comfort explains why we play the way we do. It's about how the rules and rhythms of a game give our minds space to breathe. But comfort is just the beginning, because after a while, that structure doesn't just hold us. I would say that it more starts to define us.
It's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me.
This train of thought brings us to something deeper, the identity through consistency. For many autistic people, repetition isn't just a habit, it's a way of recognizing who we are, I think. Every time we make the same choices in a story, we're not failing to branch out. We're just preserving a version of ourselves that feels true to ourselves. Think about it. When the consistency keeper always chooses the same moral path, I don't think they are being rigid. They are staying true to their own sense of logic and what feels right. The worldsmith, with his darker, emotionally charged worlds, revisits familiar patterns because they spark his imagination and give him space to craft meaningful outcomes that he enjoys. The moral explorer returns to decisions as a way of testing his evolving understanding of right and wrong, and potentially measuring growth against his past self. The immersed wanderer dives fully into each story because emotional echoes and connections form a personal narrative he can occupy. And the virtual weaver subtly validates her values by weaving empathy and morality into her consistent choices, turning them into a soft echo of the self she aspires to be. For me, consistency acts as a mirror to my own identity. When I replayed Cyberpunk 2077, I didn't want a different story. I wanted my story. The one that made sense to me. The very one where I could face grief, connection, and loss in a world that reflected my own chaos back at me, with rules only I understood. With that in mind, consistency becomes identity. The choices we repeat aren't about fear of change. They're a form of self-anchoring. A way of saying, this is who I am, and this is the world that makes sense. Consistency gives us shape. It tells us who we are inside a world of branching dialogue and chaos.
Chaos is unknowable, unpredictable.
But what happens when the story doesn't follow the rules we've built around it? This is where comfort meets its edge, and then a fear of unpredictability. For many autistic players, unpredictability isn't just a surprise that's emerging all of a sudden, like a jump scare. It can feel disorienting. A flicker of proper chaos happens when what happens doesn't match what should happen. The consistency keeper might freeze when a logical choice is punished because it messes up the order he counts on. The worldsmith could feel unsettled when a world he's designed refuses to respond the way he imagined, shaking up the way he likes to run the show. The moral explorer may hesitate when a good choice causes pain, as it challenges his understanding of ethical consequences. The immersed wanderer might pull back when a beloved character acts in unexpected ways, breaking emotional trust. And the virtual weaver could experience unease when her carefully considered moral decisions lead to unknown results, because it shakes the balance between conscience and strategy. These moments aren't just frustrating, they're destabilizing. Destabilizing, I tell you! They interrupt the rhythm and predictability that provide comfort and safety, leaving the player to navigate a world that suddenly feels less reliable and secure. But it's not just fear for the sake of fear. That need for predictability is also a form of protection. It's a way of holding back emotional chaos before it overwhelms you fully. When a game world follows rules, it's like the universe is cooperating for once. And when it doesn't, it feels like everything might just unravel yet again. I felt that too when Cyberpunk 2077 took Jackie Wells away. Without warning, without a choice, it wasn't just a story beat. It was the definition of grief replayed. I had found comfort in the structure of the game, and suddenly that structure betrayed me. But it also mirrored life. The unpredictability I was trying so hard to keep at arm's length. So maybe fear of unpredictability isn't a weakness. Maybe it's the cost of feeling too much and of needing the world to make sense just to stay steady inside it. There is a moment when the guidance you found becomes some sort of confinement, when the story you once wrote for yourself stops evolving. Autistic rules, at their best, help create coherence. They let the world make sense. But sometimes, those rules can also start to lose their flexibility. The lines that once gave shape to creativity start to turn into walls. It's a quiet shift. One that's hard to notice when it happens. Maybe you start following your rules, not because they feel right, but because changing them feels wrong. The consistency that previously gave you stability starts to resist change, even when change might bring growth. Maybe that's what games reveal to us? The balance between creation and control, between the stories we tell and the ones we trap ourselves inside. For example, my way of playing extends beyond Cyberpunk 2077. In Red Dead Redemption 2, for example, I always pick the same choices, the same outfits, and most importantly, the same damn horse, which I always name Connelly. This isn't random though. At the time, I had a celebrity crush on Jennifer Connelly when I first played the game, and I built a whole headcanon around why Arthur would choose this name as well. Even small details like a horse's name become part of that story's consistency and my own cognitive comfort. All these threads are important in my mind, especially when we consider how the autistic brain works when playing video games or tackle choices in general. But when we look at all these threads together, a pattern seems to emerge. Our comfort with predictability, our desire for moral consistency, and our reactions to uncertainty all intertwine ever so neatly. Autistic rules and rigidity can often overlap, shaping not only how we approach games, but how we navigate life itself. In my mind, that much is true, because the choices we make, the rules we follow, and the paths we repeat aren't isolated behaviors. They truly form a coherent map of our cognitive and emotional patterns. Through play, we see ourselves reflected, piece by piece, in worlds that are safe, logical, and yet flexible enough to reveal something deeper, as if the autistic mind makes more sense than at first glance. In my opinion, gaming can act as a mirror, reflecting the patterns of our own minds, as I just mentioned. The choices we make, the paths we repeat, and the rules we follow, they reveal so much more than just our playstyles. They reveal our comfort zones, our fears, and the ways we manage unpredictability as it stares us in the face. Watching yourself navigate a world with clear rules and uncertain outcomes can show how you respond to control, chaos, and moral dilemmas. It's not just about games. It's also about glimpsing how your brain processes consistency, morality, and emotional safety. Your playstyle becomes a lens, showing the subtle ways your mind balances rules and rigidity, curiosity and caution, and also freedom and structure. In other words, how you play the game can tell you something about how you play life, whether you like that fact or not.
How do we quit? I've kind of been wondering that myself.
After hearing a bunch of different people talk about their experiences with playing RPGs and multiple choice games, from the Worldsmith, the Consistency Keeper, the Moral Explorer, the Immersed Wanderer, and the Virtue Weaver, it becomes even clearer to me. So yeah, autistic rules and rigidity aren't enemies. They're more like a tag team trying to keep us sane inside chaotic worlds. My own rules built V, Vincent C. Cyberpunk, and my rigidity keeps me from turning him into a chaos gremlin who romances literally everyone and steals every car in Night City.
Wish you dropped dead.
And honestly, I'm okay with that. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it so much. And please, don't forget to name your horse something meaningful. Ferdig for now.